Welcome to Research Exchange, where evidence meets understanding. I'm your host, Laeeq Khan. Today's guest has spent his career studying something that touches every single one of us: human aggression. Why we lash out, why some people road rage, why violent media affects us the way it does, and maybe most importantly, what actually works and what doesn't work when it comes to managing anger and preventing violence. Dr. Brad Bushman is a professor at The Ohio State University and one of the most cited social psychologists in the world. His research has reshaped how we think about aggression, narcissism, gun violence, and the effects of media on behavior. He has testified before Congress, served on President Obama's Committee on Gun Violence, and shared his work with audiences far beyond academia through TED Talks, CNN, Morgan Freeman's Through the Wormhole, and a Psychology Today column that's been read more than 850,000 times. What I find especially compelling about Brad's work is that so much of it challenges what we think we know. That venting anger helps. That guns make us safer, that sex and violence sell products. The evidence, as you'll hear today, tells a different story. Brad, welcome to Research Exchange. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
Most welcome, my pleasure. So let's start with something very basic. So you've spent over 40 years studying aggression and violence, and you've built a reputation for debunking deeply held myths about human behavior. What's the most widely believed myth about aggression that your research has overturned, and why does it persist?
I think the biggest and most harmful myth is that guns make people safer.
Mhm.
If you actually look at the statistics of all the gun-related deaths, less than 1% are due to self-defense. About 70% are suicides. So people buy a gun and they think, oh, I'll use this gun to protect myself or my family.
Mhm.
But when you count the number of people who die by guns, less than 1% are used in self-defense. So if I could debunk any myth, it would be that one, especially because gun violence is the leading cause of death in children ages 1 to 19 in the USA. So more than car accidents, for example. And we've done a lot to prevent car accidents. We use car safety seats. We have people wear seat belts. We reduce speed limits. We use safer materials like for the glass. Um, and I think we need to do the same for guns.
Absolutely. And this is obviously a very contentious issue, especially in America of 2026, where it often the research and the findings and what really matters gets lost a lot of times in political rhetoric, which is quite unfortunate and sad because it has implications for ourselves, our families, and our safety in the society that we live in. So, most people believe that venting anger, so something related to that violence, is that when we vent anger, whether that could be in the form of punching a pillow or screaming into the void, it may help them feel better. And your research says otherwise. What actually happens when we vent, and what should we do instead?
Well, it does help them make them feel better. Angry people love to do things like slam doors, scream, shout, hit, kick. It comes very naturally.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean it's effective. Just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good. So, for example, taking street drugs might feel good, but that doesn't mean it's a healthy thing to do.
Hmm.
So, my dad was a firefighter,
Hmm.
and he said that if our clothes ever caught on fire, we should stop, drop, and roll, and to extinguish the flame. And that's exactly what people should do when they're angry. First, they should stop. Don't act out of anger. Maybe your grandma told you when you're angry Count to 10 before you say or do anything. Thomas Jefferson said if you're really angry, you should count to 100 instead. And that's great advice. Second, drop. And what I mean by that is drop your arousal level. So venting just increases arousal levels. You need to do the opposite, decrease arousal levels by doing things like breathing exercises, listen to calming music, muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, not hot yoga, but yoga, and get the arousal level down.
Mhm.
And then roll. Just move on with your day with a fresh new perspective. But venting is like the worst thing you can do. It's like using gasoline to put out a fire. It just feeds the flame. And maybe you've heard the old joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Well, how do you become an angry, aggressive person? The answer is the same. Practice, practice, practice. When people vent their anger, they're just practicing how to behave more aggressively. They hit, they kick, they shout, they swear, and it just keeps the arousal levels high. It keeps the angry feelings alive. It helps people ruminate about whatever it is that made them angry in the first place. And rumination is terrible for reducing anger. And so it's just like using gasoline to put out a fire. You just practice how to behave more aggressively, and practice makes perfect.
Absolutely. And this is a very important thing to think about for our audiences. The cultural script that we've been handed down through the popular media or through movies or what we hear on an everyday basis is punch the pillow, let it out, get it off your chest, is actually doing the opposite of what we think is it's doing. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And what your research is saying that, and the evidence is evidence. It's telling us that it could be surprising, obviously, that what we might think of doing venting in the form of different acts of venting as helping us is actually not helping us. And the things that you're mentioning are the ones that actually help,
That's right.
right? And
Stop, drop, and roll. Just
that's
remember that advice when you become angry. That is the best way to approach it.
absolutely very valuable advice. I'll move on to a very interesting term that you coined. So you helped coin the research behind hangry, Hangry. Is being hungry and angry a real psychological phenomenon? And what did your studies reveal about the connection between the blood sugar and aggression?
Yeah, for sure. So we didn't coin the term hangry, but our lab did the first research to show that it's real. Hangry
Mhm.
is real, and we also tried to understand why it occurs. So it's not an illusion; it's a fact that hungry people are cranky, irritable. So that's where the term hangry comes from. Hungry plus angry is hangry. Um, the reason it occurs is because of blood sugar levels. And we've done several studies to show this. So, like in some studies, we give people lemonade sweetened with real sugar,
Mhm.
which has glucose, and lemonade sweetened with Splenda, which does not. And the people who drink the lemonade sweetened with real sugar are much less aggressive than those that drink the lemonade with Splenda. We've taken, in couples, married couples, we've taken blood glucose samples every day, every morning, and every night for several days. And the people who have the lowest blood glucose levels are the most angry and aggressive spouses. So, we've also shown that people who have trouble metabolizing glucose or people with diabetic symptoms tend to be more aggressive. So So we've done research to show why this occurs. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
advocating drink lemonade sweetened with sugar, because what that does is it makes your glucose spike, but then it
Mhm.
just drops
Right.
really fast. So what you need to do instead is get the glucose at a high level and keep it there. And the way you do that is by eating foods with whole grains or vegetables,
Mhm.
fruits, things that will keep your glucose level stable at a higher level and not wear off. So,
Great, great. And also gives me food for thought. So when I'm working with doctoral students and mentoring them, one of the things I tell them is the importance of interdisciplinary work and thinking outside the boundaries of the discipline that they're in. And this is a classic example of how that relates to physiology and those sorts of things. So hangry isn't just a meme. There's real psychology and physiology behind it, which I think is fascinating, as it shows how something as simple as blood sugar can shape behavior in ways most of us never notice. And that idea that we're being shaped by things we don't notice brings me to another area of your work.
can I say one
One,
more thing
mhm, sure.
about it has practical implications too.
Hmm.
So if you're angry with your roommate or your spouse or anybody for that matter, you should not discuss these conflict areas on an empty stomach.
Right.
Don't do it.
Hmm.
Do it over dinner or better yet after dinner, or uh, grab a protein bar or something. But don't try to resolve conflict on an empty stomach, because it will just make things worse.
Absolutely. And I think this is similar to what my wife sometimes tells me, don't go for shopping on an empty stomach
Yes,
because you might end up shopping more.
right.
Um, Which brings me to my next question. So, your research also shows that violence and sex in advertising doesn't actually sell products, which goes against one of the most deeply held assumptions in media and marketing. What did you find, and why hasn't the industry caught up?
Well, some people in the industry have,
Okay.
but it's definitely true that humans are hardwired to pay attention to violent and sexual cues. From an evolutionary perspective, this is well known. The problem is when an advertiser embeds a product within a violent context, people remember the violence, but they don't remember the brand of laundry detergent or whatever the advertiser was trying to sell.
Right.
Um, so, um, so the violence and sex in the program detracts from memory for the product being advertised. So that's one problem.
Okay. So if we are really looking forward to effective advertising that's going to matter in terms of translating into sales, um, then obviously this is something to be considered. This is a
For
very
sure.
important thing. Um,
So, for example,
mhm.
we've done studies where we take exactly the same programs with violence and or sex. We we strip out all the ads and we embed exactly the same advertisements in all the programs. And
Mhm.
then we give people a surprise memory test. Oh, in this TV program there were 12 ads. And we do free recall, list the name of the ads, and
Mhm.
we do cued recall. One was for a laundry detergent. We show them like 5 brands and they have to choose the brand. On all these measures, what happens is if the ads were embedded in a violent program, people have a harder time remembering the brands. So they don't have a hard time remembering the violence or the sex. People were hardwired to do that. But we're not hardwired to pay attention to laundry detergent brands.
Right, right. That's so interesting. And I'll move on to a topic that is, for any parent, it's deeply touching. It's deeply worrying as well, when we think about what can we do and how helpless we might feel sometimes. And that makes brings me to the question, which is that you served on President Obama's Committee on Gun Violence, and you testified before Congress after the Sandy Hook. What was it like bringing research evidence into a room where policy is driven by politics? And did the science get through?
Yeah, well, you can see my coffee mug. Stand up for science. I mean, I'm a scientist, and I want people to base their beliefs on scientific facts and evidence, not gut feelings, hunches, intuitions, common sense, what have you. All of those are fallible and will lead us astray. And so I think it's really important, especially in the aftermath of something tragic like a school shooting, that we're making policies based on scientific evidence. So, for example, after school shooting, some politicians say we should arm teachers. That is like the worst thing you could do. Put a gun in the arm of a teacher. That's a terrible idea. So we wrote reports. We distributed these reports to every governor in the country, every member of Congress in the House of Representatives and the Senate, to the president, to the vice president, to the secretary of education. Every politician we could send our report to, we sent it to. And we put in plain English what the risk factors were for mass shooting. So, for example, people assume that in the aftermath of a mass shooting, that the perpetrator must be mentally ill. And it's definitely true that we should keep guns out of the hands of people who have a mental illness, but not because they will harm other people. Instead, because they will harm themselves. So I think we need to get rid of the stigma associated with mental illness. People who have mental illnesses are not dangerous. They're not violent. Some mental illnesses, of course, are. But if you compare them to the people without mental illnesses, their violence levels are not higher. So I think it's just really important as a scientist that we communicate to policymakers what the evidence is. And, it's easy accessibility of guns.
Absolutely. And
That's the main predictor of gun violence. It's true that maybe you've heard this saying that guns don't kill people, people kill people. But you can kill a lot more people with a gun than any other weapon at a much farther distance. And even though the gun may not directly cause violence, it definitely influences the probability that any act of conflict will become lethal if a gun is involved.
right.
So it is a risk factor.
True, true. And that's a sobering reminder and a window into how science and policy actually meet or sometimes don't meet in this country. And I appreciate you sharing that because it underscores something important. Research evidence has to compete with a lot of other forces in the public sphere. And that's a constant challenge for us researchers in academia, especially, which leads me to another finding of yours that I want to explore carefully, as it touches on something deeply important to billions of people around the world. So your research found that taking a single violent episode from a religious text out of its overall context can increase aggression, even among non-believers. That's a striking finding because Abrahamic religions have endured for thousands of years, and their sacred texts do contain passages that involve violence. Take the story of Cain and Abel, which appears in all three Abrahamic traditions. Isolated, it's the first murder in human history, but the moral teachings that follow are remarkably consistent across faiths. The first murder in human history. Out of context, it's simply a brother killing another brother. But in all three traditions, namely Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the story is a moral teaching about envy, the consequences of unchecked anger, and the sanctity of human life. In fact, I will add, from my understanding, that in the Quran, the Islamic tradition, the story actually follows with one very famous verse that you might have seen quoted in different places, that killing one innocent person as if killing all of humanity, and saving one life is as if you're saving all of humanity. A nearly identical principle actually appears in the Jewish Talmud as well. So, does your research suggest that the real issue isn't the religion or the text itself, but how selectively those passages are presented and taught? And if so, does that mean our focus should be on challenging distorted readings rather than stigmatizing entire faith traditions, as we commonly see in media, especially today?
Yeah, well, I'm a scientist and I'm not trying to stigmatize any religions for sure, but I am trying to understand risk factors for violence and aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And one risk factor is when is violence in the media. And
Mm-hmm.
one source of media are books, and some books are scriptural books, and
Mm-hmm.
those books contain violent stories. And in the study that you talked about, we had people read a violent scripture from the Old Testament,
Mm-hmm.
and we told them it was either from an ancient scroll or from a scriptural text.
Mm-hmm.
And in this story was extremely violent. Kill everybody in the village. Kill every man, woman, child. Kill all the animals. Kill everything. Just kill them all. Kill everything. And then we also manipulated whether God told them to kill everything
Mm-hmm.
or we left God out of it. And, it turns out that, God is an authority figure to many people,
Mm-hmm.
and, what God says goes, and people respect that. And what we found is for religious people, when God sanctions killing, that's the name of our article, when God sanctions killing,
Mm-hmm.
and God, by telling them to kill everything, that that after reading such a source, they're more aggressive against other people,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're religious, but even if they're not religious.
Wow. Okay. So that's a very interesting and important finding, and I appreciate you engaging with this so thoughtfully, and I also appreciate your research in this important aspect of our lives. So I think what you're pointing to, please correct me if I'm wrong, that context, framing, and selective reading matter enormously, and it's a really important nuance. And that's something that often gets lost in public conversations about religion and violence. Because let's be honest, I mean, nobody's going to be, as you rightly pointed out, people do give value to when somebody says that this is from God or these are sacred texts, and it's very hard to even say anything about, which connects to something larger you've said about the root cause of aggression itself, which I want to turn to now. So, after a decade of studying what makes people aggressive, you've concluded that the most harmful belief is the belief that you are superior to others. That's a powerful statement. Can you walk us through how you arrived in that?
Yeah, so that concept is related to narcissism,
Mm-hmm.
and the core of narcissism is a sense of entitlement. That means that you believe you're a special person who deserves special treatment. That means you believe everything about you is superior
Mm-hmm.
to other people. And that belief leads others, this narcissistic belief others, leads people to treat others very badly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you believe that your gender is better, that your religion is better,
Mm-hmm.
that your race or ethnicity is better, um, you name it. Any character, your political party is better. Um, uh, Anything, your city's better, your state is better, your country is better. If you believe that you're superior to others and that your identity, which is comprised of all these aspects of the self,
Hmm.
is superior to others, then you treat others very badly. In fact, aggressively. It's a risk factor for aggression. So I'm not nearly as concerned. For decades, people have said that people with low self esteem are more aggressive than others, with
Hmm.
no scientific evidence to support that.
Right.
I'm not so concerned about people with low self esteem, although I want them to have healthy self esteem. That's not what I mean.
Hmm.
As a risk factor for aggression, I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned, and what we've shown time and time again, is that people who have narcissistic beliefs are more aggressive than others across the board. You name it:
Right.
bullying, cyberbullying, verbal aggression, physical aggression, indirect aggression, you name it.
Hmm.
Um, they're more aggressive than others. So,
Thank you. And that's a profound conclusion to come to after a career of studying aggression. And I truly, truly value that. When I looked at your research first and I came across this finding, I was deeply touched. At the end of the day, even conventional wisdom would point to the importance of humility in all aspects, in all the things that you've named. And the deepest driver isn't anger itself, then, but the belief that we're somehow above other people, and that could manifest itself in so many ways.
I think my message is we're all members of the human family. That's my main message.
True.
No one person is superior to any other person. We're all human beings. Yeah.
And and that's a beautiful message. And so, if you were able to given an opportunity to design a widespread, very impactful public awareness campaign based on all the research that you've done so far, and of course, you have mentioned all of these wonderful points in reducing aggression and violence, what would it focus on? This campaign, if we're given an opportunity to do that.
Well, violence is very complex
Mm-hmm.
and is determined by many risk factors. So I I would say the main message is base your beliefs on scientific facts
Mm-hmm.
rather than common sense or gut feelings or intuition or whatever.
Absolutely.
And the main thing is be kind,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just be kind.
True. True.
We're, treat other people with respect and kindness, regardless of whether they're different from you. Just be nice.
Right.
That's that. I guess my that would be my campaign.
Absolutely.
Let's be nice to each other. We're all humans.
Mm-hmm.
We're all on this planet. We're all here together. We're all in it together. Let's let's get rid of the us and them. Get rid
Absolutely.
of that. We're
True.
all us. We're all us,
Mm-hmm.
and let's work together to make this world the best we can make it. So that's, I guess, what I would do.
Beautiful. I mean, these words sometimes seem simple to a lot of people, but they are so deep in meaning and have far-reaching implications. And that's the kind of vision, exactly the kind of vision that the public needs to hear from researchers, not just diagnosis, but direction. Brad, this was a remarkable conversation. It was genuinely important. You spent a career taking on some of the hardest questions about human behavior. And while I was preparing for this talk, I also realized that this is an important and sometimes difficult topic to discuss. Why we hurt each other, why we believe things aren't true, what actually works makes us less aggressive and more humane. And what strikes me most is that your answers don't just let us, any of us, off the hook. The work isn't out there, it's in here, and in how we manage our anger, how we consume, how we express our kindness. Thank you so much.
You're
That's the
welcome.
kind of evidence-based wisdom this channel exists to share on Research Exchange.
Thanks for
So
having me.
Most welcome. So for those watching, I leave links to Dr. Bushman's work in the description. If you are a researcher, a student, or simply curious about how online communities really function, it's well worth exploring. Again, thank you, Brad, for being here with us and sharing your insights. If you found this valuable, subscribe and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. I am Dr. Laeeq Khan. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, keep asking questions, and see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of the day.